fourth pawn opening. Will we see a queen's gambit? Which pawn will we see WEsley so push? OK, the knight comes out. It is a queen's gambit. A queen's gambit declined by transposition, but now the gambit has been accepted. WEsley grabbing a pawn there, temporarily a pawn up for black. Now I expect to see white push a pawn in the centre of the board.
In the middle of the board, yes, it's there. And, OK.
WEsley playing a very trendy line.
Yeah, it is very trendy, but you step forward and attack the knight, and this white will then grab that pawn.
Yeah, so actually now the material has levelled out. Black has given the pawn back. And let's ignore the evaluation bar for now. This is still very, very well-known territory. Black has relocated his knight to cling on to this far advanced pawn in the white half.
Yeah.
And it takes white quite a long time to try and get rid of that pawn later.
And now I'm expecting the light-squared bishop to step forward one square, get the king castled as quickly as possible. And then the white queen might do something a bit funny, might just step to the side and occupy some dark squares. OK, different strategy. And this one, I'm going to just put it in, hasn't really been played before. OK, so a new-ish idea from Teimour RAdjabov, putting some pressure on Black's pawn there on the C-line. So right now, I think WEsley, so he won't be able to keep on to that pawn long term. He just needs to gain as much time in return for that pawn. And I think the Black king needs to make a decision quite soon which side to castle on. And normally, it actually has a choice, but here I expect to see it go over to that right side very, very shortly. Black can give a check with his bishop on the dark squares and then just get his king nice and safely tucked away behind some pawns. Yeah, no, I'm slightly surprised because I've actually been studying this particular variation in the Sam Shankland chessable course. And there, it's like, get your king to the centre. Very important, you put your queen on that dark square. You know, you step on where the rook is. And I've never seen this before, so this is fantastic stuff. OK.
OK, Rajabov retreating with his knight. Do you think he's freestyling? Do you think he's prepared something deep? He's been playing very, very quickly up to this point, Teimour Rajabov.
We have seen Rajabov spring some opening surprises. And he's also going to be playing in the candidates tournament next year, I want to say. And so he would have started to work on his opening repertoires and fix everything and come up with new spicy ideas. OK, yeah, this one doesn't look too spicy, though. I'm not a fan of spices, you know, Ivanka, but on the chessboard, I love it. But right now, it's not that spicy for White. White has just put his piece on very sensible squares. I think he's just playing safety-first chess, Rajabov. OK, and the players have played a little bit unusually in the opening, but we've now transposed into a position that has been played before. And I can tell you that White's 3 times stepped forward with the queen, 1 square, and another time retreated the knight that is sitting on f3, moved it to the square in front of the queen, and twice picked up the b-pawn and challenged that black pawn that is in White's half.
OK, so lots of options here for White. Most of them involve either improving a piece, developing a piece, or dealing with that black pawn. That black pawn is actually an intruder in White's half of the board on that 4th rank, and it's very annoying. You usually want to get rid of it as soon as possible. I would be surprised, I must say, if we do see White's pawn challenge that black pawn, because that would just result in a trade. I think White usually tries to win that black pawn. It is weak. It's doubled as well. It's on the same line as one of White's rooks. So I expect to see Teimour Rajabov spend a little bit of time, go into thought, and then try to round up that pawn by just contorting his pieces slightly. And in return, WEsley so has a dream square for one of the black knights in the middle. One of the black knights is actually going to either step back or jump into that central square d5. And from there, it's an outpost. It can never, ever get kicked away. So even if black drops a pawn, it's not the end of the world. He has nice piece control. And early days, but WEsley so he's got an imbalanced opening, and that's all you can ask for when you're in a must-win situation. You definitely don't want a symmetrical pawn structure. You don't want your opponent trading everything off. But here, he's got all the pieces on the board, and it's very far from a symmetrical pawn structure. So this is good strategy, in the opening at least, from WEsley. So it's risky, of course, but that's what he needs to do.
Yeah.
To try and win this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. It entails some risk, and it's primarily to do with this pawn structure that White has in the middle of the board. check out that pawn that is on the e5 square. That cuts the board in two. I normally have a little rule here. This is an indication that white should be eventually looking at conducting an attack on the right side of the board. So if you know, first of all, I agree with David, try to win the pawn that is doubled. And then once you've done that, then you can start putting the bishops on the best diagonals and just using the extra space to generate attacks. Okay. And he attacks the knight.
Okay, so RAdjabov attacks this black knight. The square I was talking about earlier, the dream post for the black knight is actually in the middle of the board where it can never get kicked away by a pawn. We might well see a trade at some point, but then I think black will be very, very happy to just recapture with his queen and then later line up his bishop and team up with the queen on this diagonal. So, okay, we don't see a trade. Instead, RAdjabov, maybe scared of the black queen getting active, has just retreated his bishop. And now WEsley, I think he'll be very, very happy with how the game has turned. I think now it's time for the black bishop to come out. Maybe you can choose this square, its longest possible diagonal, and it has definite targets later on this diagonal. Or you can just come to the edge of the board later on and protect your pawn. So actually, RAdjabov for sure won't win this black pawn. And as long as that black pawn stays on the board, it clamps down on the position, especially if WEsley can later open up his rook and attack this backward white pawn in return. And Jovanka, you mentioned that white in the current position should later on be trying to attack the black king.
Yeah.
The problem is it takes a while, right? It takes a long, long time.
I know. That's why I said focus on the pawn first. And then once you do that, then you can focus on improving your pieces.
Yeah, it's all about this pawn
It is all about that. That pawn is a nuisance, to put it mildly. And yeah, I mean, but we are kind of reaching a very interesting position where there's an interesting standoff happening because, okay, the bishop has developed itself, because we could see a situation where white is attacking that double pawn with all his might, and black could also be defending with absolutely everything he's got.
Yeah, so black right now only defending it, me and my arrows, only defending it with his knight. So for now it's safe. But I really, really don't like this last move by Teimour RAdjabov, I must admit. I think he's playing too safe right now. He's just slowly developing his pieces. But for example, WEsley So can already strike out in the centre, break down white's kind of pawn structure there in the middle of the board. For example, if we do see a trade, then the black bishop will jump out. Maybe you even trade off a set of knights first. And if you see a position like this one, I think WEsley So is going to be very, very happy. This is only 2 moves away from the current position, and suddenly the black bishop is pointing towards the white king. This black bishop is also pointing to towards the white king. And if white simply attacks, then you can even plant a knight on a nice outpost later in the game. First, you just move your queen out the way somewhere. And this type of position, I've had it plenty of times actually from the white side, where Jovanka was talking about the strengths of this pawn. But because some pieces have been traded, because the pawn centre's opened up, actually, I think you just have too many weaknesses behind this pawn. It's easier for black to mobilise. I'm especially loving these 2 black bishops. So WEsley, he's not winning. He doesn't have a big advantage, but a very nice, simple position to play, and that's all he can hope for. Yeah,
I mean, the 2 bishops that you highlighted there, they're in the ideal squares. I mean, this analysis position is a nightmare for white. Just, okay. WEsley doesn't go for it, but interesting, because white's whole plan was stepping forward with the queen was actually to support a knight jump into the centre.
Yeah, and now suddenly the white queen and rook are ganged up against this pawn. The white bishop is ganged up against this pawn. And I think WEsley So should have traded off these knights while he had the opportunity. Also, Jovanka, you mentioned an attack against the black king. I laughed it off as a pipe dream. But suddenly, if black just waits a move, suddenly the white knight might jump and, oh dear, the queen is coming, the knight is coming, and look how many defenders are around this black king. None. And, for example, if you take this knight, it just gets replaced by another knight. And suddenly a big checkmating attack. And RAdjabov, he's not one to miss an opportunity like that. He does, indeed, jump into the centre with his knight. And his knights are maybe heading towards the black king later on. This is actually a bit of a turnaround just in the course of 1 move. I think WEsley So not sensing the critical moment.
Something about him today, WEsley So.
Wait. Okay. It was like, hang on a second, are my eyes deceiving me? Did he just step back with his bishop?
What?
Yeah, black has stepped back with his bishop into the corner of the board. What is the idea? I guess he just wants to open up this rook. It's eye-line towards a pawn, but it's so slow. Look at this bishop now. It's still on a great diagonal, but it's... I don't know, he's spending so many moves, WEsley So.
But I mean...
He's not improved his pieces.
we should really kind of like, what happens if RAdjabov goes, let's forget about the draw, let's go for the attack against the king.
I'm expecting this move, Ivanka. I just have a feeling all the top players seem to push this pawn, harry the h-pawn forward when they want to start an attack, just as a kind of a building block to later use. And this pawn could march forward as well as a battering ram, just to make the black monarch feel uncomfortable. Yeah, it's looking good for white.
I have to remember, I'm just recalling this one tweet we had, I think, in the previous tournament, where someone said, hey, is modern chess all about, you don't know what I'm doing, so just push the h-pawn.
When in doubt.
Exactly.
Especially with the structure in the middle of the board that you mentioned earlier, with white's far advanced pawn on the e5 square. Any time you have a pawn there, it's basically a signal to push your h-pawn up the board as well. And kind of in conjunction, those two pawns will create some real dark squared weaknesses in the opponent's camp. OK, he doesn't go for this approach. He switches his kind of vision to the other side of the board. That white knight has jumped forward, attacking black's queen. This is also perfectly logical. It looks like he's switched over to this left side, but if black's bishop actually takes the white knight right now, and after a bit of a trade on that side of the board, white has got rid of black's dark squared bishop, which we did highlight was the only possible defender of the black king. So he's actually trying to distract his opponent, Teimour RAdjabov. He's either forcing the black queen to a worse square, or he's going to get rid of black's important dark squared bishop.
Right, and if that knight does get traded off, he can even try to win a pawn as well, which we highlighted as quite a critical pawn. OK, so WEsley stepping forward with his queen, you know, some potential tricky ideas.
Yep.
Just, you know...
Queen and her light squared bishop teamed up together.
Exactly, you know, so WEsley is dreaming about giving a checkmate on the g2 square. It's a long way off just yet, but it's there in the atmosphere. And RAdjabov playing very quickly, attacking the rook. So...
OK, black's rook under fire from this white knight. That move, I must admit, wasn't on my radar.
It wasn't on my radar either.
It's very difficult to see these types of moves sometimes for a human, just to kind of bring your knight on the edge of the board. But that's why these top guys are so good. Their vision, just their creativity, they always find these kind of unnatural-looking moves. They often get there as well by looking for forcing moves, threats. The white knight was attacking that black rook, so the black rook had to move. And this is why Teimour RAdjabov went for this. Look at the configuration now, and look at that black bishop in the corner. What is it doing there? It's blocked by its own rook, then it's blocked by its own queen, and unless he does something magical, I'm not sure that black bishop will ever get out of the way. So, OK...
Even I thought that was strange, to put the bishop all the way in the corner.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes we need to trust our instincts, right? Sometimes we have this kind of aesthetic kind of judgment for a reason.
Check out RAdjabov's rather feisty move there, pushing forward with his b-pawn and saying to black, you know, you cannot capture the pawn, and I'm just reinforcing the knight's outpost on the c5 square. I like it.
I like it too. He's bypassed black's most important pawn. So this white pawn, it was actually a backward pawn just a few moves ago. It couldn't advance without being captured. Now it can, and that's the beauty of the en passant rule. Just because you can play en passant doesn't mean you have to. So that black pawn can actually capture the white pawn as if it just moved one square, but then the black queen would fall to the white queen. So, yeah, RAdjabov just taking advantage of this momentary kind of disharmony in black's position in order to push his pawn forward without allowing en passant.
All right, so dramatic times for WEsley. So, must-win situation. And just a quick update on the other matches. Anish Giri and Magnus Carlsen are tied before this Game 3. They will definitely play 4 rapid games. Levon Aronian and Duda. Duda still up by 1 point. Can actually clinch the match if he wins this third game. And eventually, Mamedyarov did win Game 2 between himself and Hikaru Nakamura, and he is up by 1 point. Mamedyarov and can clinch the match if he wins this Game 3. And between Artemiev and Vajelagrav, then Artemiev is up by 1 point, winning Game 2. He can also clinch the match if he wins Game 3 here. All right.
OK, so as you mentioned, Kaya, desperate times for WEsley So, and this last move, it's a nice one, I think, but it is also a sign of desperation. There was simply nothing else black could do, essentially. So he's pushed a pawn forward, trying to sacrifice a pawn in order to deflect white's dark squared bishop from some important squares. So I'm expecting that pawn to be gobbled up. You don't necessarily need to take it immediately, but why leave it on the board? It's a strong pawn, it's an advanced pawn. You don't want to allow it to live too long. So white can actually take this pawn with his bishop. That bishop then would be sufficiently protected by the white queen and by the white rook. And I think Wesley So's idea is not to just initiate some trades, was actually to bring the Black Knight to the right side of the board and to try starting to attack.
Yeah.
So RAdjabov actually offers a trade of dark squared bishops.
This is very thematic, I have to say. You know, it's start to challenge Black's control, defensive control over the dark squares.
Yeah.
I mean, you really do see this pattern. So after bishop takes bishop, then the threat that you've been highlighting all this time, like knight takes knight going to that square and threatening checkmate, is very much on the board.
Yeah, so we showed that pattern earlier on. If the white knight is able to land on the square that the white bishop currently sits on, this bishop that's just moved, then it's scary times for the black king. It's already looking almost terminal there. So that black dark square bishop is the key piece, and RAdjabov trying to trade it off. Yeah, I'm impressed, actually, by this last move. I said he was just going to snap off that black pawn, because why let it live? But this is maybe even more instructive. He's just keeping maximum control, getting rid of the opponent's best piece, or one of the most important pieces, at least. Yeah, and that black pawn that is an intruder, now on the third rank, it won't survive forever.
Yeah.
It's easy to blockade as well. So, yeah, RAdjabov showing some nice chess, being really, really just firm with his squares, just not allowing Wesley any activity, any counterplay so far.
I have to say, RAdjabov has had a great tournament, scoring 9 points. That is second best after Magnus Carlsen before this match in the finals. He's really in great shape.
Yeah, I think a break from chess just over the last month or two has benefited him. He chose not to play in the World Cup. He didn't play a couple of tour events, and I think he was just a bit burnt out, maybe just playing non-stop for many, many months, and now he's showing his best again.
Yeah, and I think the secret for him was actually not to head into tie breaks. Yeah, because he has lost 3 head-to-head matches.
He actually has. But started out with 3 losses in tie breaks, but then 2 match wins in a row in the rapid portion.
Exactly.
Maybe a third one here.
Maybe. It's looking good for him. But yeah, just don't go into tie breaks. If you know that's not your skill, or your strengths rather, then stay away if possible, and try to play forcing and committal chess in the rapid portion. And that really does seem to be working for RAdjabov. And whilst Wesley So is desperately trying to find good practical chances, OK, he does come up with a move. He retreats his knight, thereby attacking white's. No, not even attacking white's knight, because white's knight is defended by the bishop.
Yeah, I think he just wants to defend his own bishop there. That black knight was sitting on the wrong side of the board, essentially. He just needs to bring pieces over towards the king side to defend his own king, just in case an attack does start to brew around that king. So, OK, that black knight doing a defensive job. Yeah, still looking shaky for Wesley.
Certainly looking shaky. And whilst RAdjabov is now considering his move, I just wanted to show you all some more selfies, because we do have an ongoing selfie competition which will last until the very final day of the tour. And check this out. I like this one. Watching from a desert. I admit. Nice one, Jack C. And Desmond Uwosu says, currently enjoying the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. Greetings from Nigeria. And
hi, Desmond.
He's rooting for Magnus Carlsen. So big hello to Desmond. And if you too want to enter our selfie competition, you can tweet your selfie by using the hashtag #ChessChamps. Remember, we want to see faces. We want to put faces behind those names. And one lucky winner will win 1 year's subscription to the best chess magazine there is, New in Chess, and also a rather cool one-off signed Meltwater Champions Chess Tour T-shirt. And it's signed by the players playing in the Oslo Arena.
Yeah. And I just got my newest New in Chess issue about the Berlin defense. I'm going to read all about that before the World Championship match, because that is known for the Berlin defense, right?
Yeah, it's quite likely to feature. And just when Carlsen and Nepomniachtchi actually played against each other in Norway chess just a couple of weeks ago, the Berlin, that was their battleground.
Yeah. Interesting articles in the New in Chess. So.
And it's for all levels, we should say, as well. New in Chess, it might sound like it's for beginners, New in Chess, but some advanced topics in there as well, some annotations from the world's best players. Anish Giri is a famous kind of contributor to the magazine. Meanwhile, Teimour RAdjabov just bringing his knight back to a safe square, re-centralising itself and attacking black's rook. So very, very sensible from Teimour RAdjabov.
Is there any hope for WEsley to win this game? Is he dependent on a blunder from Teimour RAdjabov?
It's an uphill task.
Okay.
I don't think he needs a blunder, but he'll need maybe 3 or 4 small inaccuracies from RAdjabov. He'll need RAdjabov to lose control because right now, White has a complete grip on the position. If you look at White's pawns as well in the middle and on that left side, they're all on dark squares. They're completely locking down and creating a bind.
And a new draw between Anish Giri and Magnus Carlsen in Game 3. They are all tied, these two players. Game 4 will start in 40 minutes, and Magnus will have the white pieces. If we have a winner in that game, that player will be the winner of the match to gain 3 points. If it is another draw, then we head to tie breaks. Ooh, what do you think Magnus will do in Game 4 with the white pieces?
I think he's really going to try and go for it.
Yeah.
Of course, he'll be the favourite if it does get down to the blitz games, but he'll want to cement his lead compared to WEsley. So he knows WEsley is likely to get 0 points today, and if Magnus takes all 3, he's almost there, almost in touching distance. So
yeah, he would be 8 points ahead.
With only 9 points up for grabs in the last 3 days.
He's virtually secured the title. Okay, so the Queen returns to the back row.
Okay, so just getting kicked back even further there, WEsley. So I think this was a very good practical choice from Teimour RAdjabov to push a pawn forward and attack that black queen on the last go, because the black queen and that black bishop in the corner that we've been criticising, they were on the same diagonal. There were some potential threats. That diagonal was maybe about to open up as well. Some knights were about to disappear from it. So, OK, why allow your opponent to create tricks if it's unnecessary? So he's forced the black queen back. We see a trade of dark squared bishops.
And do you think the knight will come to the right side and threaten checkmate?
Possibly. Yeah, that's one very, very tempting option for Teimour RAdjabov. So we're thinking of White's knight on the king side, on that right side, going to the g5 square and teaming up with its queen.
Another possibility is also to improve the placing of the light squared bishop. Because one thing I've always looked at and studied when I have this particular pawn structure with that pawn on e5, I've said it many, many times, but I'm going to say it again, there's certain features that you get when you have certain pawns on the 5th row on the board. And one of them is that if the bishop steps to this very beautiful long diagonal, so look at the b1 square all the way to the h7 square, if it gets there, is such a good attacking piece. I mean, it has total control over the light squares. And from there, they can assist. They can assist in introducing more pieces to the attack. It can be a slight build. So build by build, I mean just pushing forward with the pawns slowly. And he retreats the knight. I also like this.
OK, so he's actually going after that far advanced black pawn. So that black pawn on the 3rd rank right now, it's been an intruder for too long. And I think RAdjabov is sick of that pawn blocking up, clogging up the white queen, clogging up the white rook behind her. And, yeah, he's just trying to be a bit greedy, which is fully understandable. The evaluation bar doesn't like that move, but I think it's a safe one. If RAdjabov was in a must-win situation, then I think we would have seen him go on the attack towards the black king, bring his knight, bring his bishop towards that black king. But he knows a draw is fine for him, so he's just removing one potential winning kind of trump card for WEsley. So that black pawn, once it's gone, black will need to rely on tricks and tactics to win the game.
I must say, I'm not a fan of this move because it's a step back with the knight. And also, and one thing that does worry me a little bit is that it doesn't take too much for black to also get very coordinated and initiate problems on the light squares. So primarily, I'm thinking the black knight that is sitting pretty in the middle of the board on the d5 square can actually step forward to the f4 square. And from there, it will help the light square bishop, which was doing nothing on the corner of the board, it will help it in its attack on the g2 square.
OK, so you're looking at this bishop, which has been terrible, but suddenly lining up, and the black knight keeping an eye on this bishop, but also keeping an eye on that square as well.
Yeah.
And what would your reply be, however, if white just gobbles up a pawn? This was RAdjabov's plan.
Yeah, this is your plan. I'm just simply going to forget that I ever lost a pawn, and I'm just going to introduce more pieces in. OK, so WEsley has done it.
We might well see this. Maybe the black knight will jump in as well, and maybe then eventually the black queen will come back and start attacking weak pawns. For
instance, I mean, just to highlight one potential dangerous idea is that, you know, maybe White can even think about, like, knight takes pawn.
Okay, so if white just ignores that right side of the board, then you might even see black sacrificing just to open up the white king. And now, because this bishop suddenly stares down at the white king, you can, for example, take this pawn, and this is a pin, attacking the queen, attacking the knight, and this knight, of course, cannot move because of that black bishop far, far away in the corner. So, yeah, lots of ideas. They are 3 or 4 moves down the line, so I'm sceptical about them actually landing on the board. But WEsley so has them in mind. I'm expecting to see white take off this black pawn because that was his strategy all along, RAdjabov, with his last couple of moves. But then black has some counterplay. Another one that I'm quite attracted to for black is to push this pawn forward at some point to try and open up the black rook towards the king, but also later on maybe to try and introduce the black queen at the right moment towards the white king. So, yeah, it's looking like RAdjabov maybe lost a little bit of control. Still needs to make a mistake or two for WEsley to strike back, but in the current position, definitely, for this bishop, at least, it's a happy few moves for WEsley. So
yes.
Okay, he needs to win it.
Must admit, when you were highlighting those plans, especially when I just realised that pawn for stepping forward was possible, I was like, yeah, and David mentioned it, and I was thinking, yeah. This is what black wants, an attack. And
okay, it does look like RAdjabov maybe getting a bit nervous. His last couple of moves, they're fine, they're okay, but they weren't maybe the moves that the position wanted. Sometimes when you have a position that's ready-made and built for an attack, if you don't go on the attack, if you don't justify your previous moves, then sometimes a step in the wrong direction, you lose all momentum and things will start to turn. And he has, after building up this beautiful position full of attacking chances for white, after a couple of retreats, after a couple of trades, suddenly he's stepped back and he's allowed WEsley a bit of confidence. WEsley is in the flow now, pushing forward the black knight. And maybe the other black knight will also just creep into the position. White just guarding his bishop there. What do you think, Ivanka?
yeah, I think RAdjabov played that move also to retreat that bishop one square so that it could protect the critical light square in front of the white king. But I have to say, suddenly I feel like there's been a huge turnaround, and WEsley has real chances to initiate an attack and improve all his pieces, because it's all to do with this light squared bishop that suddenly became a giant. It was sleeping before, fast asleep, doing nothing, blocked in by its own rook. But throughout the series of last moves, you kind of see that there's been a big improvement in the position.
Sleeping Beauty, maybe.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, like David says, you know, like can start to introduce a new piece of the attack. And by introducing a new piece, I mean introduce the knight into the game. And you do have to remember that white does have one structural target on the board, and that is the d4 pawn, which is totally unsupported by a fellow pawn, which means it's vulnerable. And
What do you think here, Ivanka, to take that white bishop off the board or not? Does black use that far advanced knight and capture white's light square bishop, because the light square bishop holds everything together for white?
No.
OK.
No.
I would snap it off in an instant without even thinking, I think.
Yeah.
That white bishop is the glue that just holds everything together. Also, if
you win a pawn.
Yeah, exactly. I'm also greedy. So not just do I want to get rid of one of my opponent's most important pieces, I also want to win a pawn. So if we do see black's knight capture that white bishop, it's a check. White will recapture with the queen or the rook, and then black's queen could actually pounce and come out and take the white pawn over on that left side on the light square, on the b5 square. So, OK, WEsley he does take it.
He does it, and we're expecting queen takes knight.
Either
rook
move, I think, is perfectly viable here for RAdjabov. I have a feeling he might play queen takes knight, because when you're in a safety-first mindset, when you only need a draw, maybe you'll take the queen and take the knight with the queen and hope that black will offer a queen trade and maybe some chances of safety there. But no, he does take with the rook. And this is just how great these top players are, how kind of in tune they are with the trends of the position. One moment we were talking about black going on the attack, going for checkmate. Now I think he's going to transform his momentum into maybe just a strategic advantage. And now black's rook is on an open line. The other black rook later on will team up with it on this B line, and suddenly I have a feeling that things might turn. So, OK, the evaluation bar as well, unable to make up its mind. It said great for white, then level, then great for black, now level. It's that type of position where it's so difficult to navigate, so many so many vast choices on every move. So, yeah, the players still playing some really entertaining chess. And OK, the pawn has finally dropped that black pawn. It lived, I think, 15 moves longer than I thought it would. But there we go. Radjabov has finally got rid of that pawn. And that has, however, invited black's pieces to come forward with tempo, gaining time. Black's knight hitting the white queen there, forcing her back. And now that black knight can continue its journey if it wants.
Yeah, and if I were black, I would take a leaf out. Oh, he said it before I could say it. I was going to say take a leaf out of David Howell's textbook and push forward my rook pawn so that the two knights are dominated. So that pawn controls the circuits.
Yeah, that we mentioned quite a few times throughout this game. White's knight wanted to use the g5 square, or one of the knights wanted to use that square as a launch pad for an attack, and no longer. Black has really nice control. Actually, those 4 black pawns on that right side, if you look at the right half of the board, that is quite an instructive pawn structure. If you're thinking just about defending, then that pawn structure controls as many squares as possible over the 5th rank. You have enough protection for your king, but you also control squares that your opponents want to use. So, yeah, this pawn structure, remember it. And meanwhile, Radjabov thinking he's lower on the clock as well, so maybe that will make his nerves start to jangle slightly.
I suspect his nerves were already jangling a little bit earlier on in the game, because this accounts for his safety first approach. You know, he played so well, and then suddenly he took a few steps backwards with his pieces, and suddenly thought, hang on a second, let me just grab material and have half a point in the bag. And as you can see, he's lost control.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you take one negative decision in chess, if you just think about that draw once, then suddenly it slips further and further away. And I think the other kind of pitfall for Radjabov was that his position was just too good. White's position was too beautiful out of the opening. And sometimes in chess, it's not just with Radjabov, but everyone. If your position is too beautiful, you don't want to ruin anything, you don't want to change anything. But you have to make decisions in chess. You have to keep pedaling, you have to keep the momentum up. And it's turned against him now, Radjabov, because I think just indecision has tripped him up. And now we see the white knight stepping back, trying to get rid of the knights. Actually, there has been a trade of knights in the centre of the board, but look at the black rook. Now it's eyeing up weak pawns. White has an isolated pawn on the left side. White's now defended it. He's controlling this 3rd rank, but can black continue to make threats? White is also attacking a pawn. The white queen and rook together are attacking a black pawn on that c-line, but OK, black's queen has a move now to get active if it wants to. It feels still like black is the one in the driver's seat now. Black is the one that was, well, with a very strong bishop, but he can trade for a knight anytime he wants.
Yeah.
So he's got the key to the position. He can decide when to try and pick that lock.
And talking about having keys to the position, he also controls when to break open the F-line, because he can step forward with the pawn whenever he wants, and then suddenly it will be the rook that gets into the game. OK, so Radjabov trying to relocate the knight. I was so tempted to step forward with the pawn. OK, the queen steps herself forward, and now there is an attack against the pawn that is sitting on A3.
Yeah, so that white pawn on the left side, all alone, is kind of social distancing over there. It needs protection, and that's why the white knight jumps, attacking that black rook, but also trying to leap into the black half of the board. So if the black rook moves right now, I think that white knight is going to install itself on a nice outpost.
WEsley captures the knight. Now, I wasn't sure about this because I kind of felt that the bishop was better than the knight. OK, and
I think he was just slightly worried that white knight would find a great square.
Yeah.
It was about to jump into a nice, beautiful outpost.
I agree with you, but as my teammates always tell me, you always say you play around these pieces. Play around. OK, anyway, we see...
play around. Play around.
But basically, my philosophy is sometimes if you make a mess and you allow a big knight into the position of the board, then you just kind of like, OK, fine, let's just destabilise it. OK, so we see some trades. And now WEsley is banking everything on his outside pass pawn on the left.
Yeah.
He will be trying to push that pawn forward, creating a nuisance of it. And, OK, there it goes. It's off.
Yeah. The race has started. That black pawn, can it continue its journey towards a promotion square? Can WEsley keep the white queen and white rook distracted? Maybe you can combine pushing this black pawn with an attack against the white king or attack against white's kind of vulnerable pawn structure in the middle of the board. I definitely prefer black's position. I'm slightly surprised the evaluation bar says 0.0 because I think it's easier to play with black. But Still, white, with best play, should hold the draw. So can Radjabov maintain his nerves, maintain his focus, and secure the draw, or will WEsley start to create these threats? And that black pawn, it doesn't look like much right now on its own, especially when faced off against the queen and rook, but give it 2 more moves, and suddenly Radjabov will definitely panic. And that black rook as well, once it finds an open line, has an easy route into the white position. I think Radjabov, he would love to trade queens in the right circumstances. He would love to get the white rook behind that black pawn as well later on, if the queens disappear. It's a lot to consider, though, and a 2-minute time disadvantage for Radjabov. I have a bad feeling somehow for him. I suddenly think WEsley has very, very decent chances, despite the fact it says 0.0. Let's ignore the evaluation bar because we know chess is a draw with best play. The computers see it should be a draw, but there we go. One small mistake, maybe it will shift slightly to black's side. Black has the safer king as well. Another mistake, it will shift slightly further in black's direction. And yeah, right now, WEsley doing all he can to cause some nuisance.
Okay.
I'm expecting to see black's queen now activate herself.
WEsley waking up in this match. He is thinking about the tour situation. He cannot lose this match. It's going to be almost over.
Yeah, almost over indeed.
Yeah.
And OK, he's actually given up a pawn. So I said black's queen might come forward, but nope, he gives up his pride and joy, that black pawn. But if white's rook goes and takes that pawn right now, then the black rook jumps in with a nasty check.
Yeah, and this is why Radjabov retreats the queen. You know, the queen always has to be within touching distance of the king, especially when it's unsafe. The queen is a fantastic defender. It's an easy thing to forget.
Yep. So white's queen, she looked nice and pretty, but she wasn't doing too much, just hitting nothing, essentially, hitting thin air. So she stepped back, and now she definitely has her eyes set on that black pawn on the left side and controlling some entry points for the black rook to jump into. And there we go. WEsley continues his strategy of using that pawn as bait, trying to sacrifice it in order to lure away white's rook from the defence of the first rank, the defence of its own king.
But can that pawn be maintained? Because if I were white, I would be thinking about creating some kind of hiding place for the king. I mean, I'm thinking of primarily stepping forward with the h-pawn 1 square so that the king can just tuck itself there, and then white can, with good conscience, focus their attention on that renegade pawn on the left.
Maybe, and there we go, Jovanka. You predicted it as usual. We're accustomed to this now. Should be playing in the tournament. But,
yeah.
I think, yeah, WEsley now definitely he has to keep an eye on his pawn. White is finally threatening to capture this pawn because the king has a hiding place. And OK, will WEsley use his rook to try and protect that pawn? He can slide the black rook across 1 square. Actually, yeah, I think he can do that safely. I just saw some tactics there, but black's rook can go behind, or black's rook can try and jump in to try and attack the white queen. Black can offer a queen trade. There's lots of different alternatives, but WEsley needs to play the move that he thinks will give the best practical chances. He knows with best play this should be a draw, but he needs to at least make it difficult for Radjabov, make Radjabov kind of weigh up these difficult decisions, especially now he's low on time.
Yeah, and whilst we're waiting for WEsley to come up with this move, I have to show you this tweet. This is from Kevin Room, and he says, "Not sure David liked that move." Maybe it was a move I suggested, or maybe it was a move that appeared on the board.
I think it's been on a daily basis. I've been tagged in a clip with like my face just... I don't even know what causes those faces.
You're very into the chess, David.
What can I say? What can I say? I love most moves, but occasionally they make me look like that.
Yeah, I want to see a face when you love a move. What will that be like?
No, he'll be nodding his head.
Yeah.
He does that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Just my normal face is a loving chess type of face.
And, well, WEsley has done exactly what you suggested, you know, put the rook behind the pawn. OK.
Normally, yeah, that's where you want rooks, supporting passed pawns from behind. If you put a rook behind, it will nurture that pawn, help guide it forward up the board. But the problem is queens remain. And now we saw Teimour Radjabov attack that black rook in the corner, which has provoked WEsley into shuffling the black queen as well off to the side. And now white is using his rook as a blockader. Rooks are terrible blockaders. And actually, if the queen's disappeared, I think black is almost winning. But While the queens remain, it's going to be difficult to break down white's defensive formation. Both the black queen and the black rook are tied down defending their own pawn.
And the king puts itself in the hiding place. I mean, but I have to say one thing, there aren't too many moves that white can make. You know, I can only see white shuffling the queen backwards and forwards.
Yeah, but the question is, how can WEsley improve? Even if white just sits and kind of says, OK, I've created this barrier, you're not passing. I'm not sure how black improves his situation. The black queen is tied down defending her rook and defending the pawn next to her. The black rook is also tied down, defending that pawn indirectly. If you move the black queen or rook away, you lose that pawn.
OK.
If you move the black rook off the 8th rank, the white queen will go up to the top and check. OK, the black king finding a safe square there. That's also a good strategy. Normally, this is the ideal formation for a king. Just kind of tuck it behind some pawns, give it a lot of breathing space, as near the centre as possible if the endgame comes.
RAdjabov actually stepping forward, so he's kind of broken the integrity of the pawn structure. But his plan is very clear, just to push his d pawn, just push it one square forward. OK, I quite like it. It's very difficult as a human when you have 1 minute left to just sit and kind of move your queen back and forth, because just psychologically as well, if you get in the rhythm of doing that and just kind of doing nothing, then if suddenly a threat is created, you might miss the moment. So it makes a lot of sense to push forward, to not just sit passively, to create some active play. But if there's one thing that you've taught me is always be cautious about pushing your pawns forward, especially in an endgame. Yeah. Because, you know, you cannot undo those, if they're a mistake, you can't undo it.
Yeah, pawns don't move backwards, unfortunately.
No, I know, unfortunately not. And so, I mean, the consequence of this pawn move is that suddenly it is the pawn that is sitting on the light square in the middle that is weak.
Mm-hmm. And, OK, there's no way yet for WEsley to take advantage of white's pawn pushes, so he allows this to happen. RAdjabov now has created a very, very strong pawn centre in the middle of the board.
Yeah, that looks amazing.
It does look amazing, but it can't advance yet. Yeah. Because... Yeah, sorry.
No, you go.
Yeah, because once the pawn steps forward, then the queen will just dash across and capture the pawn in the middle and give check to the king.
Yep, the black queen doing a great job on this 5th rank, keeping those white pawns in check. So, OK, RAdjabov, I think he's just trying to use these central pawns as well as a distraction. He's trying to hope that the black queen or rook move away so he can gobble up black's pawn on the left there. That is the only way WEsley So will ever win this game, by using that black pawn and promoting it. So he's trying to distract WEsley's pieces, and he would happily trade off the queens and then one of, or maybe even all of white's central pawns just to get rid of black's pawn on that left side.
OK. Well, Aronian and Jan-Christoph Duda, they have played another draw, Duda winning the first game. So that means Levon Aronian will be in a must-win situation in Game 4 to take it to tie-breaks. It's looking good for Jan-Christoph Duda in the Oslo Arena.
Yeah, and Aronian still maybe recovering from the shock of that checkmate in the first game. That was once in a lifetime. I think you'll see a world-class player like Aronian blunder a checkmate in one move. So, OK, meanwhile, WEsley So has dived into the white position with the black queen. Threatening some checks, Ivanka?
He's threatening some checks, and not an easy check to deal with, actually.
Yeah. So the black queen wants to actually drop back on the other diagonal and to the f4 square and then get to white's king from another angle. So that's why white's rook has slid across to stop the black queen giving check.
And now, well, we have a tense standoff because WEsley can now push his renegade pawn on the left one square further. But, of course, he has to keep an eye out for his king, which now suddenly could be under grave danger.
Yeah, look at the white rook now. It's doing a defensive job, as we mentioned, but it's also eyeing up a pawn next to the black king. And, OK, WEsley's retreated his queen back where it came from.
The rook is going to go back to where it came from as well, because, remember, RAdjabov is happy with a draw. A draw will net him the match point.
Yeah. So RAdjabov he leans back. He's looking confident. And, OK, WEsley, he's lower on the clock as well, 30 seconds down. He's struggling to find any winning chances. He's not in trouble here as black, but in order to create that chance to try and win the game, it's going to require a lot of gambling, a bit of a risk. And talking of taking risks, he's offered a queen trade. He
has offered a queen trade. OK, so RAdjabov doesn't actually necessarily need to capture that queen. But if he does, I think that I think that maybe he would be worse, basically.
OK, yeah. So if the queens had come off, yes, white can advance his central pawn forward, but the black king would have come across, and it's unclear whose pawns would have been better. So if you're in doubt, just maintain the status quo. And that is what RAdjabov's doing. He's centralised his queen. Look at that white queen on a great square, getting ready to support her pawn in the middle there. And now WEsley using the black queen to come back to the 5th rank. Slightly different avenue for that black queen to explore.
Well, the queen is off that A line, though.
OK,
yeah, true.
We've seen a trade of pawns, and RAdjabov is stepping forward with his queen, getting ready to check the black king.
OK, so he's weakened the structure around the black king. That's very good strategy. But now white can never, ever afford to trade queens. If the queens come off, white has a set of double pawns in the middle, which don't go anywhere. They're just blocked easily. And black basically has an extra pawn on that left side. So black will win if the queens come off. White has to keep the queens on and go for an attack, go for the black king.
Wow. I'm not quite sure about this queen check. It looked quite tempting, but it does. OK, WEsley saying, please swap off queens. David's told us the answer is always no.
Yeah, definitely in this case, you have to shut the door on that queen trade. And, OK, but RAdjabov's been forced to retreat the white queen the whole way back in order to avoid that trade. And now WEsley very nicely covers his 7th rank. We talk about 7th heaven all the time, especially when it comes to rooks, but for queens as well. If your opponent's queen is on the 7th rank, or for black, the 2nd rank, then it's danger. And, OK, the white queen has found a different way in. It's a lot of manoeuvring right now, back and forth, using all the geometry, using all the angles. But no threat for white yet. How can WEsley improve his position?
Yeah, and
like
there is a slight threat of the rook swinging across and attacking the queen. But
that's why black's king has slid off to the side, just to avoid any potential checks, but also to create a safe hiding square for the black queen next to it, if it needs. So, yeah, I really like this move from WEsley. So, yeah, the white rook can come across, attack the black queen, but the black queen simply moves, and the white rook's probably probably destined to sit on the square, acting as a blockader forever.
Somehow I feel that RAdjabov really needs to play a little bit more aggressively in terms of, like, drop the queen back and start opening up those lines against the king, just to cause some kind of distraction. Because at the minute, WEsley again has all the chances. So stepping back with the queen, the rook is now under fire.
Yeah, white's rook now has to move. Maybe you can step the white queen back to defend it, but then the white queen and the white rook will be tied down. So I'm expecting white's rook to slide the whole way across, trying to counterattack against the black king. This is RAdjabov's remaining hope to save the game. A counterattack against black's king. And now the black queen just guarding all of the pawns on that side of the board. And there we go. White's rook is just going to have to yo-yo back and forth between the two sides. You can never allow that black pawn to push. If it pushes one square further, it's just game over. So WEsley, he's created something out of nothing. He's got chances, but he needs to continue being accurate. I'm expecting... OK, he repeats the position once first. I think he just wants to gain 10 seconds on the clock. We've been here before. White's rook last time slid across. We'll see this again from RAdjabov.
No, he retreats with his queen. OK, so now it's black's rook who's under fire.
OK.
So, but the black rook will just step out of the island of the queen, or the queen will come and protect her rook.
Now, the reason I don't like this is because white's been retreating. White's queen, I said, was the only kind of saving grace for RAdjabov. He had to go for an attack against the black king to maintain the balance, I thought, but he's banking on the fact that he's equally tied down as black. And, OK, WEsley now improving his rook.
And the queen now defends the pawn that was under fire. And again, attacking the black rook. So how is WEsley going to fight this?
OK, you can use the black queen to defend the black rook. You can retreat the black rook. It's not easy. It still feels like the momentum is on WEsley's side. He's the one probing, creating chances. He's the only one who can win this position, but it's still not easy.
And WEsley drops to the 6th row. Again, not an easy decision, like what to play.
Yeah, the white queen, I think, will just wait, just sit on this 3rd rank. You cannot move the white rook. That allows black's pawn to move. You don't want to move the white king. It's on its safer square. So the white queen continues moving and attacking that black rook, so on the diagonal. And
WEsley, 20 seconds on the clock. Time is ticking down. He needs to make a decision, but the good news is that he can just waste some time to just make some random moves in order to gain time on the clock. So rook steps back all the way to the bottom, top row, sorry.
Yep. So right now, Radjabov's back in the move. Will he just continue waiting with the white queen? Will he offer a queen trade? We said queens ideally should stay on the board for white, but here you could maybe offer a queen trade. You could bring the white queen up to challenge the black queen, because then you improve your pawn structure if there was a trade. But no, OK, Radjabov keeping things simple.
Yeah. And he's unwilling to change the nature of the position, because so far he believes he has a fortress, that WEsley cannot do anything. So why change the nature?
Yeah, this type of fortress does look unbreakable on the face of it, but WEsley might have a few ways to improve the black queen and later try to sneak in. I think WEsley, the only way he'll ever break this formation of white's queen and rook is to try and create threats against the white king suddenly. And by creating threats against the white king, maybe you can trade off the queens later on. So WEsley, he's now put the black queen on the same diagonal as the white king. Maybe Radjabov's starting to feel a bit uncomfortable because of that. That's the type of annoying move that someone plays when you're low on time. Suddenly, oh no, the queen's on the same diagonal as my king. Panic. But no panic from Radjabov. He brings his rook across, attacking a pawn with its queen.
OK. And I'm going to assume that the rook needs to put itself back in front of the A-pawn, and there it goes. And now WEsley is going to step onto the 5th row and start attacking the pawn in the middle.
OK, so Radjabov trying to stay calm, but suddenly facing some real threats. Suddenly I have a feeling it might fall apart for Radjabov. Black's queen and pawn, queen and rook, ganged up against this central pawn. White's queen forced to step back. When will WEsley be able to capture white's pawn in the middle there? You cannot capture it right now, because then you drop your own very strong pawn. OK, it's hanging by a thread for Teimour Radjabov. OK, he keeps defending his central pawns with his queen.
Yeah, he's very resourceful, Radjabov. You know, he's been finding a few only moves. OK, now we have rook takes.
OK, rook takes pawn on the board, and is there a trap? So if the white rook now goes and takes this pawn as it has, black is trying to attack against the white queen, but is there a move to secure the draw here if white uses his rook to come up and counterattack against the black queen? I think if white moves his queen, he might well just lose the game. So what do you think, Ivanka? Does that save the position?
I think when you went up with your hand pointing to the that square, that's it. That's the only counter strike that white has, and it's found it.
Yeah. So the white queen had to maintain the tension on that diagonal. That's why she couldn't move. White had to counterattack instead, and we did see the queens leave the board. Now it's rook and 3 pawns against rook and 3 pawns. But the problem for WEsley is that they're all on the same side, and that means it should well be a draw. Black is better. Black has a small advantage because his pawn on the f4 square is far more advanced than any of white's pawns, but it's not going to be sufficient to win this game.
Well, he does have a better king as well.
Yeah, but that's, I think, not going to be a long-term factor. I think white's king can maybe just come round right now.
And OK, and let's have a look at the times, because Radjabov only had 3 seconds left and he made his move. OK,
maybe the clock is actually WEsley's best hope, because objectively this should be a draw. And now he's trying to force the issue by getting rid of black's best pawn. OK, this is risky, though, this last move.
Right, because black is just going to give a check. And what is the king going to do? Step forward? OK, you're on the same row as the pawn. So I would just put my rook on the 3rd row. OK, then I think white's intention is to step forward with a pawn in the centre with a check, and white's rook on the 4th rank is going to come across and take the black pawn. So Radjabov, has he got it all worked out? Is he holding the draw? He's still on the brink. It's still definitely 2 results possible here, a black win or a draw. But which one is it going to be? Black's pawn, if it trades off for a white pawn, dead draw. If it advances, maybe some chances. I think that has to be the best bet to advance that black pawn. I'm not sure it's going to work out, though. And WEsley slightly shaking his head. Can he find any winning chances now in this position? Maybe the black king can come in to the centre of the board. OK, and it does.
There we go. And now white can just take off that black pawn. White can even give a check first. OK, I don't think I would risk the check here, actually, with white. Just the more I look at it, the more I think, keep things simple. Get rid of black's best pawn.
Exactly. And Radjabov has given another check. So if the king captures that pawn, then the white rook will just step up and grab the pawn that is there on the right.
OK, so WEsley couldn't take that pawn right now in the centre without losing one of his own pawns, so he keeps that pawn surrounded. Actually, WEsley might well win a pawn in this endgame. We can't write him off yet. Still some significant chances. Endgame skills as well. We know WEsley is one of the best in the tour in the endgame. We've seen his aim chess stats before. He is ruthless when he gets the advantage. And he's actually won a very similar endgame to this against Magnus Carlsen in the past. So White's rook tries to go up and behind to try and target some black pawns. Black gives a check, forcing the White king back.
And now the Black king is going to step forward, right? Oh, no, he's going to surround the pawn, of course.
He surrounds White's central pawn first. So the Black king next has a choice to take White's central pawn or to dive towards the other White pawn on the side there, on the H line. So, OK, White might save the game if he holds on to one of the pawns, but the problem is he might not be able to.
Yeah, I mean, I think he has to step with his rook to the... OK, he attacks the rook. I was going to suggest that the White rook come to the G file and threaten to give a check to the king from the other side.
Yeah, I think this last move is really nice, actually, from Teimour RAdjabov. He's forcing the Black rook to commit, to make a decision, to decide which pawn it wants to go for. And now the White rook stepping back. Again, there is the dilemma for Black. If the Black king takes White's central pawn, the White rook steps up one square, check, and across the board, it will capture Black's pawn on the right. So Black has to wait, no way through. And look at this. As soon as Black's rook goes away, then the White rook activates itself. Active pieces, that is the key. RAdjabov, also a great endgame player, also well-versed in these rules. Active pieces. White's king not able to get active, so the White rook has to be active in order to save the game. And now WEsley stepping back with his rook.
Instructive stuff. I mean, I didn't know about this technique, so I'm learning.
Yeah, the White king, I think you know about it, Jovanka, for sure. Just maybe sometimes it's subconscious, right? Just to go active with pieces.
But the great thing, though, is to study these type of positions so much that it becomes automatic. You can do it with 20 seconds to spare. Yeah,
and this is the second time we've seen this position. What can WEsley try now? If the Black king moves, no matter which way the Black king moves, the White rook is going to go for the other pawn that it abandons. So Black's king will not be able to defend both of its pawns. That's the issue.
And what happens if the rook, okay, instead of surrounding the pawn, tries to create some kind of shield? OK, so now it steps back to the 5th row. Yep. So that now the Black king is threatening to capture the pawn.
Yes, and there we go. White's king activates itself. Now must be the moment, right? You have to get that White pawn off the board. Nothing else to do.
Yes, and it's off.
OK, so White is now down a pawn. He needs to justify that by going active. I'm expecting the White rook to swing the whole way across the board to target Black's pawn on that right side, which has been abandoned temporarily, and that will force Black's king to make a decision. OK, which way will the Black king go this time?
To the middle of the board. It's the most active square. And also...
Down to the 4th rank. There we go.
Exactly. Down there. And then at the same time, he's getting ready to advance his pawn and also give check to the White king.
Yep, and there's a barrier, there's a shield. If the White rook came across with a check, Black's rook would block. So Teimour RAdjabov asking a question of that Black pawn. There's a trap in the position. If White's rook now takes that Black pawn next to it, then the Black pawn in the middle will step forward with a check. And look at that, the Black rook will suddenly unleash an attack against the White rook.
Wait 1 second, David. I mean, that is a very crafty check. But this check, that's what I wanted to say.
Black will block.
Yeah, but can you... I was just working out this king and pawn ending.
I don't think you could capture that, Jovanka.
No, you can't.
Yeah, king and pawn endgames, if you're pawn down, sometimes you can hold, but not while other pawns exist. And there we see.
Yeah, we do see Magnus Carlsen entering the Oslo arena. His game 4 is about to start against Anish Giri. They are tied after 3 games. If we have a winner in game 4, then that player will be the winner of the match. If it's a draw, then we have tie breaks. And of course, we will jump into that game when this finishes. We need to know if WEsley So is able to make a comeback to play a game 4.
I mean, he's fighting for his life. This has been an impressive game from both players. Teimour RAdjabov for being tenacious, resourceful, fighting, surviving so far. But WEsley So to even create these winning chances that he's found, it's taken a real lion's effort.
And yeah, he checked to the king is driven backwards, and now I mean, what happens if White were just to carry on checking, drive the king even further backwards?
I think we might find out the answer, Jovanka. I expect to see White give another check. Maybe the White rook can come up the board as well to the 7th rank, try and swing across towards Black's remaining pawn. First, just centralising the king, also very sensible. Now black's rook needs to move. You cannot retreat the black king, I think. That would just allow white's king to step forward. So black's king is fixed where it is. Black's pawns as well. I mean, no point touching them yet. You have to move the rook. And the black uses his rook. He's going to try and start harassing the white king from the side this time. He's going to try and give some annoying checks.
6, 5, 4, not so much time.
2, 1.
Yeah.
OK, he made the move with 2 seconds left.
Wow. OK, the rook now takes a defensive position on the third row, but this does allow WEsley to come forward with his rook, and the pawn cannot be defended.
Look at Radjabov as well. He's starting to realise he's just made a mistake. And he resigns, about to go 2 pawns down. It changed just like that in the space of 1 move.
Wow, what a comeback by WEsley So. And I'm wondering, OK, so he resigned. He didn't lose on time, but he was about to.
Yeah, he was about to. I think he just panicked. He missed this move. He allowed WEsley to bring his rook down to the 4th rank, and black was about to gobble up white's remaining pawn. Black would have had a 2-pawn advantage. Actually, still quite a lot of work to be done, maybe even still objectively a draw, but Radjabov, yeah, just giving up hope, just letting things slip. He panicked because of the time.
It was